first understand how and why NATO was created and how it became so dependent on the United States. After World War II, Europe was weak and the Soviet Union was expanding its influence. To stop this, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was formed on April 4, 1949. The goal was simple. If one NATO country was attacked, all members would defend it. From the start, the United States took the lead by providing military leadership, nuclear protection, and financial support. The Cold War made NATO even more important as the US built permanent military bases across West Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom to counter the Soviet threat. Over time, many European countries reduced their own military spending, relying more and more on American protection. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and many believed NATO was no longer needed, but instead of dissolving, NATO expanded. Basically, many former Soviet-controlled countries in Eastern Europe wanted to join NATO for protection. These countries had lived under Soviet influence for decades and feared that Russia might try to dominate them again. So in 1999, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined, bringing NATO closer to Russia. This expansion continued in 2004, when Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania became members, pushing NATO right up to Russia's borders. Russia saw this as a direct threat, arguing that the West had broken a promise made at the end of the Cold War not to expand NATO eastwards. The biggest turning point came in 2008, when NATO promised that Ukraine and Georgia could also join in the future. This enraged Russia, which saw NATO moving too close. That same year, Russia invaded Georgia, showing that it would not tolerate NATO's expansion. In 2014, Russia also took over Crimea, further increasing tensions with NATO. In response, NATO deployed more troops and missile defense systems in Eastern Europe, and the United States remained the alliance's backbone, providing most of the military funding and troops. During Barack Obama's presidency, the US tried to balance NATO's expansion without provoking Russia too much. While Obama increased NATO's military presence in Eastern Europe, he also privately assured Moscow that Ukraine would not be allowed to join. However, when Joe Biden took office in 2021, he changed this approach. The US began openly supporting Ukraine's NATO membership, sending billions of dollars in military aid. At the same time, Finland and Sweden also applied to join NATO in 2022, which further increased Russia's fears. Seeing NATO grow stronger, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, arguing that NATO was threatening its security. This war completely changed NATO's role. Instead of just being a defensive alliance, NATO started directly supplying weapons and training to Ukraine, making it one of the biggest military conflicts involving the alliance. Now, despite being so powerful and large, NATO relies heavily on the United States for leadership, funding, and military strength. To put in context, as of 2023, the US alone contributed nearly 70% of NATO's total defense spending, making it the largest financial supporter of the alliance. Many European countries, especially Germany and France, had significantly reduced their military budgets after the Cold War, assuming that US protection would always be available. Beyond funding, the US also maintains a massive military presence in Europe. As of 2023, around 100,000 US troops are stationed across NATO territories, with large bases in Germany, Italy, Poland, and the United Kingdom. The US also provides critical military support that many NATO members lack. This includes advanced missile defense systems like the Patriot and Aegis Ashore, which help protect European cities from potential missile attacks. The US also supplies cutting-edge fighter jets, such as the F-35, F-16, and F-15. In terms of nuclear deterrence, some experts estimate that around 100 US nuclear bombs are stationed in NATO countries like Germany, Belgium, Italy, the Netherlands, and Turkey. Similarly, America also helps the NATO army track enemy movements and intercept their communications through spy satellites and drones. But with Donald Trump back in power, a seismic shift is coming. Donald Trump has repeatedly criticized NATO, arguing that European countries do not contribute their fair share to the alliance. He has stated that if NATO members fail to increase their defense spending, he might withdraw US support or even leave the alliance entirely. Now, without America, NATO would lose nearly 70% of its total defense spending, along with its nuclear deterrence and rapid deployment forces, which have protected Europe for decades. So if we exclude America's defense spending and just take into account Europe's defense budget, the stats are as follows. Europe's combined defense spending in 2024 was $457 billion, and if you calculate Russia's defense spending after taking into account the purchasing power parity, the Kremlin's military budget racks up to a staggering $461.6 billion. So for the first time ever, Russia is outspending all of Europe in military budget. What makes this even more alarming is that Russia operates under a single command and speaks one language, while European armies are divided, follow different commands, and speak multiple languages. Similarly, to match the combat strength of 100,000 US troops, Europe would need to significantly increase its military power. In simple terms, this would require adding around 50 fully equipped brigades, which means thousands of tanks, armoured vehicles, and heavy artillery. On paper, Europe, including the UK, has about 1.47 million active-duty military personnel, which seems like a huge force, but the reality is more complicated. These troops are spread across 28 different national armies, each with its own leadership, command structure, and military priorities. priorities. Unlike the US military, which operates under a single unified command, European armies are led by different military generals from their respective countries, each making independent decisions. This means that instead of having one unified strategy, every country follows its own military plans, uses different equipment, and operates under separate chains of command. So the combat power of 100,000 well-equipped and highly coordinated US troops is far greater than the same number of European troops spread across multiple countries. Another example of massive logistical gap is that to stop a fast-moving Russian advance in the Baltics, NATO would require at least 1,400 tanks, 2,000 infantry fighting vehicles, and 700 artillery units, a force larger than the combined armies of France, Germany, Italy, and the UK. Similarly, if the US were to dismantle its 6 nuclear bases in Europe, it would leave a massive gap in Europe's defense.